This view is incredible.
You must be careful.
I am being careful. I don't want to ruin the moment. Oh, hey, welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you've never listened to the podcast before, in addition to sharing entertaining and informative photography and business-related content, I also go on missions with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. At the moment, we've been commissioned to document the sentient landscapes of Dramatis 7.
They only reveal their true appearance to those who prove themselves worthy.
And I am going to pass that test.
Sure. Of course.
Oh, speaking of landscapes, in this episode, I'm talking with landscape photographer Free the Dust about his journey in photography, including the amount of planning and preparation it takes to get amazing landscape shots, as well as potential dangers that you want to be aware of if you're headed out into the wilderness. All that and more after the break. So is this like a written test or something? Hey there, photographers. Are you tired of complex image editing software that requires hours of training just to master the basics? Look no further than Luminar Neo. Luminar Neo is the intuitive image editing software that is easy to use for photographers of all skill levels. With its user-friendly interface, you can quickly edit and enhance your photos with just a few clicks. The software offers a wide array of editing tools, including layers, masking, and local adjustments that allow you to make precise edits to your photos. And with AI-powered tools, Luminar Neo takes your editing to the next level, allowing you to remove backgrounds, enhance landscapes and photos, and much, much more. Luminar Neo is available everywhere on Mac OS and Windows devices, so you can use it no matter what platform you prefer. It also works as an extension for Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom, so you can seamlessly integrate it into your existing workflow. Whether you're a professional photographer or just getting started, Luminar Neo is the perfect image editing software for you. Try it today and discover the power of intuitive and easy photo editing. What are you waiting for? Go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Luminar or click the link in the episode notes and get started today. Hello and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am your host, Casey Fatchett, and I am here today with landscape photographer Free the Dust. Welcome. It's going. Before we get into our main topic of conversation, we have to roll the dice breaker, and it is 11, which means roll again. Actually, 9. Worst photography or business advice you've ever received?
Okay, that's a good question.
Or least helpful?
Least helpful is to kind of, just personally, from what I've experienced, sort of act outside of your capability, oversell yourself. There's nothing wrong with going into a shoot with confidence, I think, but going into one saying you can do things you can't doesn't actually provide you with more clients or more capabilities or anything. So.
Yeah, it actually tends to hurt you in the long run. If you, I did that by accident once because I thought that the client meant something else, and we were on a different page. It was for a commercial client. We were on different pages, and they didn't understand the terminology. And it became a miscommunication that just kind of like kept going on and on. It was about lighting. And I was just like, oh yeah, sure, I can do that. And then we got to the day of the shoot and they're like, yeah, so you're going to do, they're like, what? I think, yeah, maybe we can do that. Like, they thought that was going to be like all steady lighting so that they could shoot video as well while I was shooting. And I was like, no, that's not what that means. That's not what we were discussing. And then, so yeah, in my opinion, don't do that either. That's not a good way to grow your business.
Definitely.
Don't fake it until you make it when it comes to like what you're able to do.
Yeah. Slow and steady. And then, people just appreciate the honesty. So
yeah, I think that actually telling people like, I don't do this, or I don't have this particular skill set is actually like some people have taken the chance.
Yeah.
And said like, all right, well, we'll give you a shot if you want to try it. And that works out for me in the long run, but also that sort of advice, like that honesty leaves a better taste in their mouth for the future. when they're looking for someone where you do have the proper skill set and they come back and hire you, they'd rather have somebody that is honest with them than somebody who wastes their time, which is and money, which is usually the bigger concern.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a lot of the shoots I've done, it's about relationship building, and if that's what comes first, then then the photography is going to work itself out. You're going to increase your capabilities. You're going to get new equipment. You're going to be a better photographer. But if there's no kind of trust there, then that sort of falls apart. So.
Yeah, because it's that sort of thing when it comes to any type of client, but especially commercial clients. They want to. The biggest thing. I have one of my best friends, is totally commercial photography, and his thing was like they're not looking for the best photographer.
Yeah.
He's like, while I provide them with like high quality work, their goal is not necessarily the best person. Their goal is someone who delivers consistently and, without, problems. Yep. And, like someone who shows up on time, is professional, does their job, and delivers within the scheduled time. And do you get it? So it's not about like, I've got to be the absolute pinnacle of my field. It's more about, and that's how you get more jobs along the line throughout your relationship with somebody, is by, being honest and delivering what they want consistently.
Definitely.
So you are primarily a landscape photographer.
Correct.
How long have you been in landscape photographer? When did you get started? What inspired you to become one?
I'd say about 4 years. My background in photography before that was a little bit when I was a kid. My brother would, take like a shoebox and make like a pinhole camera type thing, and shoot film. He used to live up in Alaska. And then my dad also shot photos a lot. He's a folklorist, so he was doing like kind of documentary type work a little bit. So I grew up around cameras, but never shot myself. And then I spent a while in the military, and one of the jobs I had in the military was actually to learn and go through professional like photography courses, obviously for very different purposes, but that's where I learned the techniques, all the basics, just aperture, shutter speed, things like that. So I kind of took all that knowledge and realized, well, hey, like, I was born and raised in Utah. I like the outdoors a ton, and I'm already out hiking. I'm already out taking photos. So why not bring a camera and take photos rather? So that's kind of that's how I got into it, I'd say. That's
sort of the impetus. Yeah, I have actually a friend who has also been on the podcast a few times. That's how he got into photography. It was through the military. Folklorist. That's really interesting. That just like immediately piqued my interest. We might have to have another conversation about that. That's I don't know, like my nerd brain is like really wants to explore that. We'll stay on topic. And I've looked through your portfolio. Great landscape shots. I think that one of the things I love taking landscapes. It's not my job. It's not like my main focus. Pardon the pun. But it was bad. That was bad. But I always like to end up using the term focus sometimes when I'm talking about photography, and I'm like, I don't mean it like that. Like, that most photographers or even hobbyists don't realize how much work goes into, like, sometimes even just a single image. Like all of the things that are involved in going out and getting the shot. What is your process? Like when you decide on like a particular shoot, like what is your process like for going about that, setting that up?
To be really candid, like there's a lot of failures. There's a lot of times you go out on the field and it's just, you can't, like for whatever reason. 2 nights ago, there was a possibility of seeing the Northern Lights here in Montana. There's like KP4, which is a pretty decent like level that goes up to 9 as far as the ability to see the lights. And so I was like, you know what? I've got to at least try. So I went out, left my house at midnight, and it was kind of overcast. And so I was looking at the weather radar and trying to see, okay, like where's there a break in the clouds? I can maybe capture something through that. Basically spent until 5 a.m. not taking any photos. So that's an example. I'd say the process is like a lot of effort. I mean, with some shoots, it depends on the season, but there's a lot of factors that go into that are, not in a studio, for example. So I'd say weather is a huge one. Time of year is a huge one. There's a place like outside of Kanab, Utah called the Portal. And it's this giant sort of archway. It's sort of a cove, and you walk into it, and then you can shoot like this night sky through it or through the day or whatever. But I calculated, there's only like a week and a half out of the entire year where you can get the Milky Way synced up with the direction the portal's facing without the moon and
like blowing it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's it's just a lot of planning, I think. And over time, you kind of realize what time of year is the best place to be in what area. I'd say mostly in the West, and which shots for when, like the Firefall in Yosemite. That's like a very particular one too.
Yeah. It's like a couple of days or something like that. Maybe a day.
Yeah. It's like 2 or 3 days. And then if there's not enough water, then there isn't, the Firefall doesn't exist. So
see you next year.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that there's like sort of, and I think that Instagram culture is also partially to blame for this. There's this thought of like, oh, you just show up and you take a picture. It's, you just go to the location, and there's a lot of work that goes into, like you said, planning, just like looking at, like, you've got to be concerned about, what the weather forecast is, because that has such a huge effect. And that was one of the things I always found interesting, like reading about Ansel Adams, and like he was like, he just knew like what time of day the light was going to hit certain things. And he just like, he'd been there so many times. And it's like the thing that he just went out there and been like, I'm gonna take this one picture and we're good. And it's like, he knew his area so well that he knew when the weather was going to be good enough to attempt whatever shot that he was doing. And like when the light was normally good in those times, and sometimes go out there and, you don't get the break in the clouds, or you don't get whatever it is that you're looking for. And there are times when I've been out, like, I think I do most of my landscape shots when I'm traveling, and where like, just had excellent luck to have like this great, like whatever it's called, the God light, coming out of the cloud cover and like on the mountain and whatever. And you're just like, that's awesome, man. Like, I just happened to be here at the right time. But that, like, a lot of that is timing, and just like repeat until you like find the opening and like everything lines up. And that's amazing. Like, I'm familiar with the portal, but like that it only is like available like a week out of the year where you can actually see that hadn't even occurred to me. That was, that's probably why I'm not a landscape photographer.
There's another small aspect to it that you made me think of, which is one thing I actually do plan around is also people.
Yeah.
There's like Instagram versus reality, those locations. And I actually, sometimes if I'm going to a famous place, I'll try and calculate around when people are going to likely be there or likely not be there. Just part of it now.
Yeah. So. It's unfortunate. I personally, as a tourist, try to be one of the probably 2% that is respectful and like leave it better than you found it. Sort of mentality. And it is mind-boggling sometimes to see how people act in nature, and where they're just like, if it's a super popular place and you're just like, what is wrong with you? Like, were you raised, like, you weren't raised by wolves, because wolves would have more respect for this. But yeah, it's just like incredibly sad sometimes to see how people act. But I'm always of the opinion, and I tell my wife this when we're traveling, I'm like, if we're going somewhere that's like super popular and a crowd is going to be an issue, like in getting a photo of it, like we need to go super early, like really early. And that's the same thing. I mean, the same thing happens in New York City. Like if I'm doing an engagement session or wedding photos or whatever, I will tell people like, you can't go after X time to this location because you're going to have 100,000 of your best friends in the background of your picture.
Yeah.
It's there was, I think one time, there's a place called the High Line, which is a park that's built on an old elevated train track that runs through part of the city, and it's beautiful. And it became very popular, but like after 9 a.m., it is packed with people just all the time. And I had a couple said like, "Oh, I said we got to get there early if you want to do this." And they were like, "What? You mean like noon?" Like, no,
That's not a,
no, like 5 or 6 a.m. That's when we got to get there at sunrise, before there's a bunch of people. And they're like, "Oh, that's what you mean by early." Like, yeah, and I'm sure it's even more the case. Like you were saying, you were out all night, like hoping to get the shot.
yep.
So in those places, even I'm not familiar with every like famous location, but like my this is my experience is like, there are lots of places that are pretty far removed from like off the beaten path. Like how far is like what's the farthest you've gone? Like do you hike in? Do you like how do you get to these locations that are removed from main roads? Like when I was driving through Wyoming and Montana, at one point I was just like, people would say like, oh, this is the last stop for gas. And they'd be like, all right, you better fill up. And because it really is the last stop for gas, you're probably it's going to be 200 miles before you reach another gas station. So you better fill up. And like one of the times there was a path leading off of the road to this mountain. It doesn't look that far away.
Yeah.
And one of the people I was traveling with was like, "Oh, how far away is that mountain? We could maybe like," because they were thinking, "Oh, we could just drive over and like get a photo," because there was like this 2-lane dirt road like leading off into the distance, and the guy's like, "Oh, that's 26 miles from here." Yeah, it's just it's a different, like I think conceptually for people who have not been there and have not traveled in areas like that, like they don't understand how far away some of this stuff is.
Yeah. I think it's one thing about the West, and it's one of the things I love the most about the West, is how large it is and how much space there is in between things, like you're saying. Definitely, even if I only use like an eighth of a tank of gas, I'll go fill it up at the last spot before heading on a dirt road, because you just never know, right?
Right.
Never know. And I've gotten stuck before. I've got like anything that's happened, it's probably happened to me. Yeah, I mean, how do I get to those places? I'd say some of the most remote places I've been are probably in southern Utah. And there are remote places there. There's one thing that I like about Utah, I hope it never changes, is that really the access of like major highways through southern Utah is pretty limited. And so you can get on these dirt roads and go really, really, really far into the desert. And depending on the time of year, you actually do have access because it's dry. Obviously in the spring, a lot of people get stuck and there's rescues happening. But I basically stock up, I'll have gas. Now I have on my truck, I have like one of those like gas tanks that goes onto the side, just as safety kind of thing. Those max tracks as well, just in case there's mud, which there always is somewhere. And then food and supplies and gear. And it's just kind of, life has taught me to have that extra stuff with you just because you don't know what's going to happen out there.
Yeah. So, being prepared. It's
exactly. Yeah.
You have to be prepared. And I'm sure like your military background has something to do with that as well. But like that's in my travels of the West, or even into Canada and over in that area, it's sort of like, yeah, it's huge. It's just like I talk to people who live mostly in urban areas, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's lovely. I'm sure you can just drive." No, you can't just drive up to these things. It's not like, "Oh, I'm going to hike a mile from the parking lot, and then there's this, like this amazing view." Like, no, you're going off into the wild. And then once you get to a place where you can't go any further in your vehicle, then you're getting out and walking.
Just don't eat the berries,
No, tastes like burning. It's not good for you. Like you have to go into it. I think for anybody, like, please feel free to interject with your thoughts. But if you're thinking about doing this, you really have to go in with preparation so that you don't get hurt. That's a very serious concern.
Yeah. And I've been in a couple scenarios where, I kind of learned the hard way. When I was a little bit younger, I went with my brother and we went camping, southern Utah. We were something like 50 miles from the nearest like paved road, and he had like this old Blazer, that was just sort of like a work truck / whatever. And we're out there, camp for like 2 or 3 days, and then he goes to start it, like not happening. And realize there's like little holes in the radiator, and like all the food is leaked out. And we're like, okay, now we're 50 miles from anything. There's no cell service. There's nothing out there. Like, what do you do? And he's a pretty creative guy. So we put in like a little bit of sand into the radiator and then water, and somehow that like got us enough to get to a road,
Yep.
you know, but like, you don't want to get in those scenarios. So that lesson was like, okay, make sure everything's tip top shape, make sure you have extra of everything, and then go out there. So
Yeah, that's, I mean, I guess one of the other questions I have, like, yeah, that's sort of like you're just in a remote location and you're just far from anything. And there isn't anyone who's coming to necessarily help you unless you can get on a radio and
Yep.
call in for a rescue. Like, what sort of things are you dealing with other than, like, you know, the remoteness of it, like weather and animals? I think that's another thing that people don't. Wildlife is not, you know, happy about you being there necessarily. Like, they're not.
definitely. I think in Utah again, there's scorpions, there's rattlesnakes, there's a lot of those kind of things. So if I'm doing like hikes in the summer in Utah, I'm not doing them midday or anytime. You know, it's like evening. That's when like rattlesnakes might calm down a little bit. Like it'll be a little bit more lethargic depending on the time of year. But also that time of year is just generally I'd avoid it because of those kinds of things. Another example is like in Alaska. Was there, I guess, last summer? Yeah. And went on a hike in a pretty remote place. And I think, you know, one of the things is that I am alone in a lot of these shoots and a lot of the hikes. So you got to be conscious of that. Like, what can I, you know, what's my contingency plan because I'm alone? One of those things now I have is like a little GPS activated thing, but I also honestly don't want to be the guy that calls in a helicopter because of my poor plan. You know?
Right. You don't want to be that guy.
Don't want to be that guy. So I went on this hike, and it was like a hike up to the top of the peak, and I'm going up, and I see like a black bear that's like pretty far away. You know, I'd say like, I don't know, half a mile. So I'm like, I'm comfortable with this distance. I can see the black bear. Good to go. Hike up the whole mountain, go to the top. Amazing views, just absolutely beautiful Alaska. And on my way down, I see him still. He's just eating berries, you know, doing his own thing. Doesn't really care about me. And then I get down kind of into a little bit of like high bushes, not trees yet. And that's why I kind of lose sight of him. But I'm like, it's fine. He's far away. So I keep zigzagging down. And I come around a corner, and there he is, like 25, 30 feet away from me. And he's on his way somewhere. I'm on my way somewhere. We both stop, look at each other. And he just kind of, you can see his nose, like he's sniffing me out. So like, what is this guy? Like, should I eat him? Should I not eat him? Not sure. You know, what's up?
What's his deal?
Yeah, what's his deal? And then I just pull out the bear spray, and I'm just like, go on, bear, go on.
Yeah.
He like thought about it and then went on. But that was like, you know, that was extremely scary. That was like, no offense.
We get, where I live in New Jersey, we get brown bears, and black bears, that like because we've invaded on their territory, will just like come into people's backyards and hang out. A lot more so black bears. And like people will find them, like a whole family like hanging out in their pool. And so people would get freaked out. Like I was with, you know, there's a couple of reservations near us where I like to go hiking, and they'll be like, hey, everybody, you might want to stay away. There's a black bear like on the trails. You probably don't want to be there. And it's like, that's the one thing like I've locally dealt with when I'm hiking with my dog, and my dog is she's very alert. She can tell me because she can smell stuff way better than I can and will know. We were hiking one time, and she just stopped whenever she knows. She's been trained to, like, if she smells another animal or a person or senses somebody, to stop and sit and wait for me to tell her what to do. Which is good because like one time she just stopped, and I was like, what's going on? And she's just intently staring ahead of us, and there was a very large coyote, possibly a coy wolf, like stepping out into the trail ahead of us, like about 100 feet ahead. And it just like, it's the same thing. They're sort of like, look, what are you guys doing? Are you a threat to me? Like, are you guys going to bother me? You're not doing anything? Okay, then I'm just going to go about my way. Then like kind of walked across the trail, then stopped again, like to make sure that we weren't going to follow it, and then took off. But I was like, not I certainly, wouldn't want to come across an actual a wolf.
Yeah, it would be.
That would be a very a not fun experience. And bears, like I was always tell my wife, she's like, oh, we should, because of course she loves Yellowstone. And she's like, we should go there. We should she's managed to get herself on Yellowstone TikTok. And she'll see these videos and she's like, it's so beautiful. And I'm like, you realize that location, because I'll see the location. I'm like, that is pretty far you don't want to go there. Like that's going to be also bears.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the place you want to try to get to. You want to go to the resort that's on the lake.
Yeah.
We can just stay there, like a nice cabin or something. And you don't have to hike up a mountain to get there and worry about wildlife.
Yeah, grizzlies and whatnot.
Man, yeah, it's when I grew up, I lived near Ted Nugent, and went over to his house a couple times. And he's got these huge, he's got stuffed animals, not like stuffed animals, but what is it called?
The taxidermied ones.
Yeah, taxidermied animals. And you see bears, and you're like, that's a big bear. I don't want to deal with
bigger
that.
than I thought.
Yeah. It's bigger than you think of it when you see it on TV or something, or from a distance. I have friends who are wildlife photographers, and how far away the bear is, and how far you when you kind of keep a sense of what your focal length is, and you're like, okay, it's getting a little too close at this point. Maybe time to pack up at this point.
600 millimeter minimum at least.
Exactly. I saw a video of these guys, and I think they were also in Alaska, and a grizzly walked up to them. They were shooting something, and they had their video, and it was and you could hear the guide, because they had a guide with them saying don't move.
Yeah.
You're in his territory. You don't and he's like, can I move the camera to follow him? And he's like, no, don't don't move anything. Just let him go. Cause it was a real big grizzly who was maybe 20 yards from them, just walking past them and just staring them down the entire time. And I'm like, that's crazy. That my problem would be trying not to dirty my pants at that point, and hoping that I can outrun at least one of the people I'm with.
Right.
That he's not after me.
That scene from The Revenant,
Yeah. Oh, dude, do you know the Hugh Glass story? The actual...
It's more hardcore than the movie.
Oh, yeah. Way more hardcore than the movie.
Oh. Usually in movies, they make it more hardcore. In this case, they had to dumb it down because it was so hardcore.
People wouldn't have believed it. They would have just been like, there's no way this guy actually did this. It's insane. I highly recommend the actual Hugh Glass story for anybody who's interested in that sort of stuff. So we're kind of talking about dangers, the lurking dangers of landscape photography. What are some of the more what's the most fun experience that you've had going out and shooting landscapes?
Well, the way I usually set up if I'm doing shoots, product shoots for gear or something like that, is I try and do what I call a round or something. So I'll try and find a week off or a time that I can go out and just hit up several locations within a certain area. And I think, first of all, it's really productive just as far as workflow, but also you just get to see so much in it's like a high, in a short amount of time, you just get to see all this new stuff. So I think from the last year, that week in Alaska was really, really amazing. I hadn't been up there since I was a kid. My brother went to high school up there. But I would just say kind of going out, walking on an ice field, you see a glacier coming out of an ice field and then you walk on the ice field itself. That was a crazy cool experience. You feel like you're on, it kind of looks like some of the scenes from Interstellar.
Yeah.
When they're those worlds,
Yeah.
It's kind of what it felt like.
It's the cover shot for whatever the poster shot for Interstellar.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of felt like that. It's just such a vast place. I think it was, I was happy to lose myself in it. So I think that was one of the most kind of fun experiences. And everything's just, it's it hasn't been touched by people really that much. I think that's something that really attracts me personally to nature in general, is this just one of those places where it hasn't been for lack of a better word, like corrupted or kind of moved or changed or altered. It's just how it is, and that's I find a lot of value in that.
I mean, personally, as I don't have nearly your experience level with going out in the woods, but I mean, it is one of those things. I grew up in the country in Michigan, and then moved to New York, and it's something I always missed. So that when I moved back, to move to New Jersey, one of the places we were looking at, we wanted someplace that had easy access to nature, and like this is not nearly like what it is out west or in other areas of the world where I've been, but I completely understand what you're talking about. It's that sense of untouched.
Yeah.
This is, and that's always the sort of thing that like brings awe to me.
Yeah.
Is like seeing that sort of like incredible like nature. Like it's just seeing it like this untouched view and thinking like, man, I wonder what this place that is now a city once looked like. Like what was this like?
Yeah.
Like before it was, ground up and built upon and otherwise, turned into concrete.
Yeah. I mean, I think like time also slows down out there. I think that's a big deal as well. You have an iPhone, so you can do more during the day, and it's
Right.
like that's the pretense of, in some way, in shape or form, being more free to get more done. But to be free to get more done is actually, in my mind, it's like not a prison, but it's more of it constrains you. You know what I mean? It's actually going out to places like that where there's less to do, and time slows down. That you actually truly feel like more free, more open, more relaxed, I think, as well. I mean, it has like psychological effects as well, boosts serotonin, all this stuff. So
I no doubt about that. Like I often think about what, because people are like, oh, what did people do 100 years ago or 100 years ago? Like kids today are like, what did people do in the 1900s? Well, even when I was a kid, like you didn't have a lot of choices. Like you couldn't just sit down at your TV and choose from 100 different movies and whatever things to do anytime. But I often think about like, what did people on the frontier do? Well, they had to do things to survive.
Yeah.
Like you had to hunt or gather or build your shelter or maintain your shelter or all of those sorts of things that took up your time and made you more connected to your surroundings than just like, oh, I'm just thinking about something to busy my mind for, the next hour because I don't have anything to do before my next meeting or whatever it is.
Right.
I feel that connection to, you're exactly right. Like in my experience, limited as it is that, that time dilation sort of experience where things just slow down and it feels good in a lot of ways to just feel connected to your surroundings.
Yeah, 100%. And that's something that I like, I kind of, it's part of my pitch when I talk to like companies and just sort of like tourism boards, things like that as well, is that I might go to these crazy places like Alaska or wherever. But one of the things I really try to impress is like what I call like second tier locations. And those are locations that are accessible to like everybody, right? Because like, of course, you live out west or I don't know, you live in Utah, like you can drive 3 or 4 hours and you're in the desert and that's fine. But what about, someone from New York or something like that, or Florida or whatever? Well, I really believe, like, based on what we were talking about before, is that like you can find a cool place near you. It doesn't matter where. It's just making the effort to go out and see it. And it's making the effort and finding the beauty in those places as well. I don't think it's exclusive. I don't think that it's only the Grand Canyon, only arches, only a place like that. I think it's state parks. Like that's one of the America's like best, I don't know, not secrets, but there's so many state parks that are really, really cool and you can go see. And a lot of them are, in the neighborhood kind of. So,
yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things like before I lived in New Jersey, I made kind of like everybody makes fun of New Jersey and they're like, oh, I mean, like it's just, it smells and blah, blah, blah. Like you're thinking of just like the coast, because the coast has like right next to New York City has like there's a bunch of cities there and there's like a lot of processing plants and things like that. You got smokestacks and it stinks and whatever like going on over there. But like you get into New Jersey, like, and it really is the garden state. Either it's either forest or farms for the most part, like just like tons of it. Like in, within an hour of where we live, like there's like so many state parks and places to go. And it's just like, it blew my mind. I didn't realize it. And I lived in New York for, 20 years that I was like an hour away. Like I always thought, oh, I got to go up into the Hudson Valley, like north into New York to like go hiking, or I'd have to go all the way to Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this stuff was just right there. Like, yeah, look for things that are close to you. There are places to get away. It's not quite the same as the isolation that you can find out west.
Sure. Yeah.
We're like Wyoming, where there's more antelope than people.
Seriously. It's one of the most, it's like the emptiest state I've been through. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. I drove through there in my 20s, and that was the location where it's like, where's the mountain? Oh, it's like 20 miles that way. But yeah, it's just like you drive forever and not see anything.
Yeah.
I don't think that, like, I was with some other people from New York, and they were just like, what is going on? Like, they were just sort of like scared.
Yeah. Where's the end?
Like, where is everything? Like, where, like, not like, I need a city, but like, there's not a house. I have not, like, we've driven for an hour and we haven't seen a single home of any kind or anything. And you can see pretty far. Like, miles and miles and miles. And it's just like, that's just how it is out here, man. Like you can just keep going. And I think that there is something for me, especially, that's appealing about that. I think that's also, I mean, the elephant in the room, I think lately is Yellowstone. The series has like exposed a lot of people to this, this part of America, even though I think they shoot some of it in Canada, up in the Canadian Rockies. The people see this and they're like, wow, that's gorgeous. And they like the show. The one thing that the show, I think, if you watched it, I don't know if we talked about that.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning they did a much better job of, like, in the first couple seasons, of like showing you how far away things are from everything. Like they had the helicopter that they had to like use to get people in and out of in case of an emergency or whatever. And now it's just sort of like we're in whatever season 4 or 5 or whatever, like where they don't really focus on those things as much. Like, this is how far it is to get to town. Like, town is 40 miles away, like, or whatever it is. Like, or I don't know, maybe it's even farther. I don't know. But just like, you're not, I have people like where I grew up, I was 10 miles from town, like from the nearest town. And like my wife, who grew up on Long Island, just had no understanding. Like, what? Like, how far away? Like, and my parents didn't understand that, like, the distance from them to town was how long Manhattan is. Like, that's like trying to explain to them, like, that's, trying to put things in scale. Right. But yeah, like, I think that there's like that people get those social media videos or photos and they think like, oh, that's so lovely. I want to live there.
Well, it's I think reality's different than that, and I think things get romanticized, which it's I think there's parts of it that are true, but I think a lot of it's also that this is a huge place. There's a lot of difficulties. It's a long winter, and for better or for worse, that weeds out a lot of people, but it's just not what the perception of it is, and it's a place of hardworking folk. I mean, that's not just a show where everything's helicopters and basically kind of Gucci up stuff. And that's the charm. The charm is in that kind of lifestyle, is that difficulty that exists here. In that cooperation with the land. I think trying to like come here and make it into kind of what they show on the show a little bit is sort of too bad.
Yeah, I think that, unfortunately, one of the things that they kind of like portray, like one of the main points of the show is like, we got to keep the outsiders out. Like, we got to keep the people from coming in here and taking over the place. But at the same time, they've like exposed so many people to this location that everybody's like, oh, I want to go there, and like I'm perpetuating the actual problem that we were originally talking about at the beginning. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Well, it's no longer it's no longer called Bozeman. It's called Los Angeles. So just
oh yeah, I mean, I can't believe how many times since probably like the second season that show came out, people were like, oh yeah, I'm going to go over to Bozeman, and I'm like, what? Like I was just like like listening to something like, oh yeah, we were in Bozeman, and I'm like, why? Like who? Like why has this become? So, oh yeah, like that's why it's so popular.
it's on the map.
Yeah. The hard winter. I think that's something that most people don't get. They don't really understand, especially if they haven't lived in the country at all.
Yeah.
Like how cold it gets, and how sustained winters are, how long the winters are.
Just keep going. Yeah.
I mean, I've traveled extensively in Scotland, and it's where like my ancestors, some of them came from. And I was recently, well, not recently, it was last year. We were there and we went to an island off the coast where my family was from. And it's where they actually did a lot of the recruiting for the Hudson Bay Company.
Okay.
Because they knew these people could survive in like harsh conditions. Because one of the guides was telling us, he's like, oh yeah, I mean, during the winter, it's just gray. And we were so far north that it was end of April, beginning of May. And like the sun wasn't exactly setting until like 10.
Mm-hmm.
So you're pretty far north. And he's like, yeah, in the winter, it's just gray and snow. And like the wind is like 120 miles an hour. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah. And I was like you have storms like that? He's like, no, it's pretty sustained.
Just keeps going.
It just keeps, and he's just like, it just blows. All the houses are just concrete, like, and facing north and west, like there's no windows because like it's just
why try
battered. Like it was like, and it's just like there's no trees. Like you just walk around like, yo, there's really no trees here. This is crazy. And he's like, yeah, it's hard to keep kids here on the island anymore. Like they don't want to, because they know that there's a whole other life that doesn't involve that sort of hard living.
Yeah.
And
I thought I saw an article like in the last couple months or something where it was like there's settlers like selling not castles, but they're selling like small homes in probably in a similar type area for like real cheap because population is decreasing. And they want people to move in.
Their problem is a problem that I've experienced in other places here in the States. Actually, is like the prices have gone up. People want to go out there and vacation and live in these houses in the summer.
Okay.
And because people can't afford them, the people who live there can't afford them. Like this town, like it's Isle of Lewis and Stornoway, which is like where the best blood pudding in the world comes from. He was saying that, you know, houses up there are like 300,000 pounds, 350,000 pounds for like these little stone concrete cottages. Everybody also has like their own concrete mixer next to their house. But like these, you know, like people can't afford them. They can't afford to keep them.
Just getting priced out. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I think that's happening in other areas of, unfortunately, like it happening out west in some places too, where,
yeah, for sure.
Like all the tourists like want to have their
vacation Airbnb or whatever.
Yeah, their vacation home, and they buy up the Airbnbs or buy up houses and turn them into Airbnbs, and then you have no place for the locals to live.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real issue. I think that we need to address as a society. That because like they were saying out there, like half of the houses were rentals on this remote. You have to take a ferry for 4 hours, 5 hours from mainland Scotland to get to this place.
Wow.
Like once you are there, you are there. And it's pretty like it's weird to see how life is like people live there, because you're so remote in that sense.
I hope there's good single malt there.
What's that?
I hope there's good single malt there.
Excellent. They actually, it's connected Harris Tweed. I don't know if you're familiar with like that. It used to be like an old hunting like you'd have these like tweed coats, whatever. And I was like, why are they wearing tweed? But it's the island that's sort of connected to Lewis, and it just looks like like Harris Tweed looks like the landscape in different times of year, like because they don't have trees. It's all like moss and lichen covered rocks. So like when it's winter, it's kind of this browns and tans and a little gray in there. And then in the summer, it's more like some green and blue, like steely kind of looking stuff. I'm like, oh, that really was hunting camouflage because, but they have the best gin that I've ever tasted in my life, Harris Gin, because they're trying to get the distillery up and until they can age the scotch for like the time that they need to. They're just making gin, and they made like the best gin in the world. So it's pretty good. Highly recommend it if you can find it. Recommend for you, like if as like landscapes and stuff. Man, this is just a beautiful place. And the farther north you go, and in like say mainland, but mainland Scotland, it just becomes more like Norway.
Okay.
The farther you go up, it becomes more like Nordic country up
Very
there.
cool.
And lots of mountains. There's mountains everywhere. And I felt, I was feeling bad because they have different, they'd gone to like get a shot. And I was like walking somewhere which I thought was public land. And then I realized that I had like crossed over onto what I believe was someone's farm or their sheep farm. They're crofting. And I was like, ooh, I feel bad that I went out there. But I found out recently that they don't have any trespassing laws.
Oh, really?
You're allowed to just walk across, as long as you're not going into somebody's home.
Sure. Yeah.
You're just allowed to like walk across
That's nice.
stuff. So they have hiking trails that go across the whole country.
Lovely. Yeah, I've got to go there. Yes, I do.
And definitely recommend it as beautiful landscapes. So, I mean, like, what's the balance that you think, like, between I think it was interesting that you're mentioning, like, when you're talking to tourism boards about finding these sites that are accessible to people who are not who are not going out deep in the country. Like, for you, what's your balance between, like, shooting those areas that are, like, accessible to most people and going out into, like, for deeper projects? Like, how do you balance your time between the two of those?
I think the kind of deeper projects, those take, like we said before, like a lot more planning, and scheduling as well. It also kind of has to have like an ROI for me as far as like the client. So, if I'm going up to Alaska for a week or something, this has to be like worthwhile in a business sense. Obviously I'm going to enjoy it, but it has to pay for, a significant part of it or something like that. And then when it's kind of like more local stuff, I think it's just much easier to kind of jump over, take a shot, or, take a small trip in the West somewhere. Like I go back and forth between here and Utah, like Montana and Utah quite a bit. So there's lots of opportunities, I think, on the way in both different places. And I kind of line up work based on those trips and things like that. So I obviously prefer the more in-depth stuff, but, there's a lot of logistics that go into it. Summiting certain peaks in the West, it takes, you've got like a month and a half, 2-month window. And then in that window, you have to have, make sure you have like all the right gear. You have to pack everything out to a T. I mean, it comes down to like specific shoes, specific socks, things like that. Just basically, kind of a lot of planning before. So I'd say I definitely do more of like the tier 2 locations, the smaller ones, just because of the access. But I just so much more enjoy the really like out there stuff. Like I've been planning for 2 years, not able to do it, but I've been planning for 2 years to go to Greenland and do some hiking up there. But, logistically, it's a lot more difficult. So.
Yeah. Well, especially because you're not nearby.
Exactly.
And if you're not familiar with the area, I'm curious, like, what is your loadout for like photography gear wise?
Sure.
For I want to differentiate between someplace that's like easier to get to. You're probably taking more stuff.
Yeah.
Is my guess, because you just have access, like, and you don't have to pack as much survival related equipment versus something that's much more remote, where you have to hike up, like, like summit a peak or do something like that.
Sure. I've basically been trying to sort of over the course of the years, like upgrade the quality of the equipment, but like if I can make it less, I guess, size wise and weight wise. So it's still pretty heavy, but like I can't sacrifice that. I shoot with the A7R4. And I usually have like right now I have a 16-35, 2.8. And I always kind of chase the 2.8s because all the lighting situations that I shoot in nature, it just helps with almost everything. I mean, I'm sure it helps in every type of photography, but I want to usually shoot in those sunrises, sunsets type situations, and you just get so much more out of a shot in that sense. That comes with me every time, no matter which one. And then depending on where I'm going, I'll bring like the drone, so just DJI Mini 3 Pro. Just basically upgraded that recently. And then I'll have like a gimbal with iPhone just for like story type shots, things like that. Got a macro lens, got a 14 millimeter Rokinon as well, 2.8. And I'm saving up because it's just so expensive, but I do want like a really, really nice telephoto. I was hoping for 600 millimeter, but you know, wait 4 or 5 years for that one or something.
Well, I mean, like it's also like it depends on like what you want. Do you want like a zoom? Because I know like Sigma has like their 60 to 600 or something like that, which I hear good things about, and it's not terribly expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, or do you just want a like dedicated 600 millimeter, which is going to be like a car.
Yes.
I always think there's a few of those that like the really like the 400 and 600. And it's just like you're just carrying like it's like a shoulder mounted missile system. And there was even like Canon used to make a 200 millimeter f2.
Mm-hmm.
It was the same size. It's just like a beast, and like people were carrying that like all like I see people like they shoot their portrait sessions with it, and I was just like, man, I'd be sore after a while just like lugging that thing around. But yeah, I don't know. I've got a buddy who does a lot of bird photography, and he has a 600 that he shoots with, and I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't know. As I get older, I'm like, I've tried to find things that are lighter. But yeah, I totally get it. You want something like a nice telephoto. Like, I think that's one thing that most people, some great landscape shots are telephoto. Like, I think that everybody thinks, I got to go wide. Like some like really great landscape photos are like telephoto shots that are,
that compression you get at some of those lengths is just, it has a nice effect to it. You know, I can see that, you know, shooting something that's in the distance, but with a higher focal length can be really cool.
Yeah. Like mountains, I think like if you can manage to get it into whatever you're into your range of view in a telephoto, and you can get like when you can get those, again, godlight moments, has like it looks even better in telephoto. Like, I suppose you're taking this like really wide shot, and like you get like, I can see the other peaks and stuff, which might be lovely in its own right, but like there's just something about that like compressed and like shots. Like I on my recent trips when I go places now, I'm like I take one telephoto lens and one wide angle, just because I'm like, okay, I'm going to do one or the other. It's not going to be, you know, necessarily work always with both, but like I'm going to find something. And I've been doing more and more of the telephotos for landscape shots, which I think is very nice. All right. So I think we touched on this a little bit, but like what would be, as we're like sort of moving towards the end of this conversation, was the bear the scariest experience you've had while you were out shooting, or was it the not having gas? Or
I think the bear thing was definitely like frightening, but there's also, I have to, like, if I'm being completely honest, there's, you know, the fact that I walk away safely from it only allows me to say this, but basically there's also kind of an awe, right? Like you come that close to a wild sort of beast, whatever you want to call it. And I think, not like the, hey, I'm going to go pet a bear type of thing, but like it happened sort of naturally and whatever, couldn't be avoided. You know, I think it was scary in the moment, but also kind of like, I don't know, sort of a little bit of adrenaline, a little bit of a rush, but also kind of that awe of just being so close. I could see its nose twitch. I could see it looking at me, sniffing me. And it's amazing to kind of encounter a wild animal like that. So I don't know if that's the scariest thing. I do have an experience that 100% was scary. And that was in New Zealand. So basically went there, traveled there for about 3 months, and I was hiking by myself, just doing a lot. A little bit of a backstory. I was in a really bad motorcycle accident. I was in a wheelchair for like half a year, so I couldn't walk. I had to learn how to walk again. And then after all the PT of like a year and a half, I was like, okay, I'm going to go hike because that's what's going to make me strong again, like from before.
Right.
So I flew to New Zealand and went hiking, and just hiked a lot of hiking, big bag on, water and everything. And near the end of my trip there, about 2 weeks before the end of the trip, I go on this hike, towards Mount Aspiring National Park. It's like an area there, people familiar with it. And I hike up, but it's like, it's fall here, so it's spring there.
Yeah.
So there's still some snowpack up at higher altitudes. And I hike up and I'm going up and up and I'm getting into these altitudes. And there's like these Forest Service cabins that you can stay in, you're reserved there. So I pass the first one that's in, I get, I'm aiming for the second one. That's like my mark for that day. I get up to these altitudes and I start like getting into snow, and the snow gets deeper and deeper. And I'm like sort of post-holing it. It's up to like the middle of my thigh. And I'm like, okay, this is bad. It's also like dusk. And I'm seeing, like, looking down this valley, I'm seeing like a storm is starting to, like, the clouds are kind of moving in. It's starting to get a little windy. And so I just stand there and I'm like, okay, according to my map, I'm about half a mile away from this cabin. I can't see it because it's so steep. So I know it's there according to the map, but can't see it. And I'm just standing there thinking about it. And I'm like, okay, like, should I keep going? Should I not? These conditions are dangerous. I'm not really prepared for this. As I'm standing, I look across like to a valley over here, and I see an avalanche happen. And there's no one else around. Like no one's hiking in the mountains. I'm the only one up there, like very far away from any help or anything. And I see an avalanche happen. I hear it, and I just watch it just roll down. It's basically at the same elevation I'm at, but across this valley. And I'm like, well, there's no one hiking over there. Like there's no one putting footsteps into the snow, like agitating it, moving it. And in that moment, I'm just like, I see a storm coming. It's dusk. I can't see the cabin. I see an avalanche happen. And this fear like strikes me to the core. And so what I did is it was really hard to do because you have like an ego. You're like, I'm going to accomplish this task, this goal. I'm going to get to this place. But I'm like, you know what? If you continue, you're not going to live. I felt it. I don't know how to explain it. So I turned around, went back like 6 miles. My feet were all like bleeding and, all this extra stuff on them. Stay in there, sleep there the night, wake up the next day. There's like 40-mile-per-hour winds the whole day. Can't see anything, really bad storm. Sleep there another night. And then get up the next morning and it's like clear, like perfectly blue skies. And then I hike up a little ways, look with binoculars at where the cabin I was supposed to get to was. The whole area had avalanche, and that whole cabin, there was like just a little part of the roof was sticking out of the snow, and that's it. And I was like, okay, I would have definitely died. So instead of staying in New Zealand, I just got on a plane, flew back, and spent the last like week and a half with my family because I was like, yeah, this scared me to my core. So
that's like, like watching the avalanche on the other, that would have, yeah.
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 Yeah. And that's what you have to do with nature is like the biggest piece of advice that I would give to anyone that goes outdoors is respect it. You have that respect for wildlife, for weather, because you're tiny, it's huge, and you will not win.
Yeah. I think that like people don't understand that like the most dangerous thing is the weather. Like more people succumb to weather or, other stuff then obviously you have to be respectful and cognizant of wildlife, but it's not the thing that gets most people. I think that people think about wildlife and they're a little bit more like, oh, it's an animal, it could attack me, I have to be careful of that. But then they don't think, oh, there's a storm coming in, I'll be fine. That's not good. No good. No bueno. So yeah, that just listening to that story, I was like, my anxiety levels just kept going up. Like each thing that added, like, oh, there's a storm coming. I was like, ooh, that's not good. And then it's like, I watched another avalanche. I was like, I kind of guessed where it was going when you were like, I went out the next day. I'm like, there's something bad happened to that other cabin. Something not good happened. Yeah, man, that's yeah. Again, another reason that I'm not a landscape photographer. I yeah, like I think it's really funny you mentioned like you have to overcome your ego because there's sort of like this sort of especially if you spend any time out in nature, like you kind of get this like I have to be a judge of my own capabilities. How far can I hike? How far can I climb? Like what am I capable of doing? Can I, you know, get across? I mean, even in my limited abilities, you know, I will sit there and sometimes I'm like, can I jump across this? Am I safely going to be able to traverse this little like area here? Like, can I get across or should I look for another spot? Like it's having a very being honest with yourself about what you can accomplish and like listening to that inner voice. I not in that type of instance, but I've had that like, you need to get out of here.
Yeah.
This is not, things are not going to go well. I have had that happen. I know immediately that voice in your head is like, yeah, this isn't good. You got to leave. So I can identify with that. As we're like wrapping up, what would be your advice to anybody who's interested in getting into landscape photography?
I would say, first of all, like, you know, master the camera. So understand lighting. Lighting is huge, and it just in landscape photography, you don't control, you know, the scenario. You can kind of control yourself in it, I would say. So understand all the basics of how to work a camera, because lighting conditions can change like second by second in nature. You can't turn on a light and, you know, add light or take away light or direct it from which direction it's coming from. And you kind of have to be really intuitive and kind of tie into how these things work in nature. Like if you want that soft light, like, yeah, get up at 4 a.m. to be on the shoot location by 5 because you want first light before even sunrise hits. You know, just being cognizant of kind of what's going on is a huge part of it, I think. I think patience is a huge part of it too, when it comes to wildlife, things like that. Waiting for the right conditions to be present. I'd say those are the two big things: patience and intuition. Like as far as the lighting.
Yeah, I think that patience is becoming a lost.
Yeah, true.
Like people want, like, I want to show up and I want to take my photo and I want to like, you know, move on to my next thing or whatever. I think that being able to, I mean, it's bringing back the concept of everything sort of slowing down when you're out in places, remote locations like that. There's a mindset that you have to get into of allowing things to happen as they're going to happen.
Yeah.
And you have to work with it. It's not going to bend to your will.
Yeah.
So another part of letting your ego go is not thinking that you are going to control nature and make the situation fit, you know, bend to your desires. It's I
think you can enjoy it too. Like, you know, there's sort of two philosophies I've heard about, you know, landscape photography, which is an amateur will go out there and just take photos of what is there, and a professional will go out, will have like a photo design in his mind and go out there and take that photo, right? So with nature photography, it becomes difficult because it's not like I can go out and be like, okay, clouds, I need you to be over here. We need the God light. You know, I need all this like teed up.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can't do with time and experience is like, you know, knowing that portal is going to have the Milky Way in the center of the portal that 2 weeks out of the year. You can plan around that stuff, but you need to enjoy it as well. If it becomes like, if I ever get to the day in my photography kind of journey where I'm, you know, it's like everything's got to be perfect, I'm just getting too sort of anxious about it and not enjoying the situation I'm in and letting that situation flow, then, you know, that'll be a sad day, because it's just enjoyable. It should be.
Yeah, it bums me out when I see things like people like compositing things in to make it like I didn't capture it. I'm a purist in that sense of like people throwing in like the Milky Way into the sky of a shot where you're like, people are like, no, he doesn't show up like that in that location. Like that it's obviously fake. Or, you know, I don't know. The thing that I'm starting to worry more about is like AI and it's stealing people's images, whatever, but like the ability of it to create without like taking your work, but like having some creative team going like, oh, well, we want this shot with this in the background. We need 2 mountains. Not one mountain isn't going to do. We need 2 mountains. And the AI is going to create that. And you're just like, well, it's not real. Right. But it fits exactly what you're looking for. It has this sort of, whatever the marketing team thinks is going to be the best shot. There needs to be, I don't know, needs to be, but I'm an old man shaking his fist at a cloud. Like, I think there needs to be some more respect for the authenticity of creating 100%. The image and in your camera. And hopefully we. Do you have your own website? Are you tired of dealing with slow loading pages and poor support from your current web hosting company? Consider switching to SiteGround, the top-rated web hosting company that provides 24/7 support and super fast hosting speeds. SiteGround's platform is built on the premium Google Cloud infrastructure, ensuring top reliability, security, and speed for your website. Their fast network and storage provide optimal site speed and a high level of redundancy, so you can trust that your website will be up and running smoothly at all times. With SiteGround's ultra-fast server setup, your pages will load 30% faster on average, giving your visitors a better user experience and improving your website's SEO. And with hosting starting from just $199 per month, it's affordable for any budget. Plus, if you're not completely satisfied, SiteGround offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't suffer with a terrible web hosting company any longer. Make the switch to SiteGround and experience top-level support, super fast hosting, and a reliable, secure platform for your website. I spent years with a web hosting company that was absolutely terrible. My site was constantly getting hacked and support was nearly impossible to get a hold of. Since switching to SiteGround, all of those problems are in the past. Just visit nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/SiteGround or click the link in the episode notes to get started and begin enjoying faster, more reliable web hosting today.
Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
Did you know that climate change is actually making spiders larger?
That's uncomfortable.
Yeah, the warmer temperatures, spiders are getting bigger.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get a bigger hammer.
I'm more of a MacReady in the Thing. I get my flamethrower. And all I can think of is Australia, where the spiders are like huge to begin with.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a really, it's been going around a lot. Somebody's like, oh, are you worried about the spider? And he's like, oh, that's just Jerry. Because it's like in the background of his video, there's this, like 2 foot wide spider up on the ceiling, and he turns back and the spider's gone. Like, it's just like that. It's like completely and they're like, he's like, that's just Jerry. We don't worry about him. And it's like, I'm worried about him. It's like he could carry off a small child on his own, and not like the kids are out there like riding Jerry around like a horse.
Well, maybe humans are, we've reached some kind of peak and we're on the downhill, and spiders are on the uptick, and it's just going to be a spider run world.
Spider society. Who knows? Yeah. Thank you very much for being on the show. Everybody check out Free the Dust. Where can they find you on the internets?
Basically just Instagram, just Free the Dust, and that's where everything goes. So pretty simple.
I'll throw up a link to that in the episode notes. Thank you very much for being on. You're always welcome to come back. If you have any thoughts about something you'd like to talk about, let me know. Otherwise, I'll reach out, and enjoy the show, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed our chat with landscape photographer Free the Dust. Some great stories there and some great information for you guys. If you didn't catch his information, you can find it in our episode notes. And while you're there, you can also find some great free ways to help out the Nerdy Photographer podcast, including leaving us a voice message on our contact page, letting us know what you thought of an episode or what you would like to hear covered in a future episode. We definitely want your input, so go and do that. You can also follow along with the Nerdy Photographer on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Reddit at The Nerdy Photo. That's at The Nerdy Photo. And while you were gone, I was able to prove to the sentient landscapes of this planet that I am indeed worthy.
Who knew the process would involve beating them at bar trivia?
You mock me, but I also got a 100 credit gift card in the process.
Touche.
Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heartbeat beating about? You better listen.
Do you enjoy listening to your entertainment? Why am I asking? You're doing it right now. You must. With Audible, you can enjoy all of your audio entertainment in one place. From bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, mysteries and thrillers, motivation, wellness, business, and more. Audible has an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre. But that's not all. Audible also offers exclusive Audible originals from top celebrities, renowned experts, and exciting new voices in audio, plus thousands of podcasts from popular favorites to exclusive new series. And with the Audible app, it's easy to listen anytime, anywhere, whether you're out taking photographs of landscapes, editing pictures in your studio, or going on intergalactic adventures with the Nerdy Photo Crew. You can listen to your favorite audiobooks and podcasts wherever you want. Right now, I'm going through Frank Herbert's Dune Saga once again. The world of these books is so rich and deep with history, I come back over and over and over. New members can try Audible free for 30 days. So what are you waiting for? Go to audibletrial.com/nerdyphoto and sign up for Audible today and discover your next favorite listen. That's audibletrial.com/nerdyphoto.